Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Brookline Interactive's group show dedicated to domestic violence, the safety net. However, it's not just domestic violence during this time of COVID and this new year. We've expanded the issues that we're going to address to include whatever is necessary and timely. And today we're most fortunate to have three people who are very well versed and have experienced inclusion, diversity, and equity. First of all is Liz Tavares. Liz, where are you?
Right here. Hello.
Liz joined the Nuss Realty Group. Liz is a lawyer, a commercial real estate firm in 2017 as a consultant and advisor. She previously worked in real estate at a boutique real estate office. She's trained in research. She's drafted and implemented office policies and oriented and trained new staff. She works with developers, investors, landlords, and tenants. Reggie Smalls, who has been on this show before, thankfully, has been a security consultant with Safeguard Security and Surveillance for the last 3 years. Reggie, where are you? I don't see you.
Right here.
Oh, there you are, Reggie. Thank you. He specializes in helping homeowners and business owners make their property more safe and secure, which we really need during these times. He and his company strive to meet the specific needs of each client. And Reggie, you do other things. Do you want to mention them?
Sure. I'm also a pastor at Bethel Pentecostal Church in Dorchester as well.
And don't you coach? Did I hear that someplace?
I have in the past, yes. I'm a basketball referee, certified referee for the MIAA, Massachusetts.
That's terrific. Terrific. Tissa Hami is the founder. Tissa, where are you? And principal of Korsi Consulting, which specializes in diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting and training. She works with Fortune 500 companies, medium-sized businesses and nonprofits, and universities on their DEI strategies and goals. And Tissa, you would be open to anybody who contacts you who needs DEI training. And I'm sure that there are a lot of small businesses, once things pick up, and maybe we're maskless, who could use your services. Welcome to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
No, I thank you. This is so important. Liz, how did the three of you come together to discuss anti-racism?
Well, Susan, thank you for having us. So Reggie, Tissa, and I, and actually you're involved in that networking group. We meet regularly. It's a networking business professional group where folks come together and they talk about their businesses and they build relationships and help one foster each of their businesses. So, we were meeting continuously and we meet twice a month. And it was only discussions about our professions. And in the meantime, the whole country seems to be falling apart given what was happening with racial tension. And so we thought it would make sense to bring this group together to have the discussion, because really it's all about having the discussion about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that wasn't happening in our networking group, and it's not really a forum for it. So we decided to approach the board of that networking group and say, hey, look, this is an important topic for us, for many people. Would you be open to having a discussion about it? So we organized the group. We had a discussion about it. I think you participated, Susan, I can't remember, but a number of people within that group participated and we were able to have this open discussion about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And really, it was led by Tissa, who's really the professional, if you will, in this group about this discussion. So that's how we started.
Reggie, why does this work matter to you?
Oh, it's very personal to me, as I'm sure to all of us. It's something that has impacted me all my life. It's something that it's a topic that I know, depending on the time or the occasion, many people don't want to address, but it's also one that can't be avoided. I'm sure we all heard the term that, oh, I'm colorblind, or no, I don't see race, and I'm a Black man that's in America, so it's impacting me every day, and not always negatively, but it's there and it's real, and so it's very real to me, and I think on the business side, we need to address it more than we do.
You know, Reggie, I'm a discrimination attorney. I do a lot of discrimination cases at the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination. And I haven't really seen an uptick, but I've seen a more pronounced attention paid to diversity, inclusion, and equity in the last 6 months. It's really hard. These cases are very, very hard. I think we're all more aware, not that I understand. I thought I was pretty, I don't know if the word's liberal, but open and enlightened. But after the events of the last 6 months, I'm not, and I'm ashamed to say that. So I'm trying, and I think a lot of people are trying to at least listen more carefully and be conscious of what's going on around us and to step up and step in. That's my new expression. You step up and you step in.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Tissa, Korsi Consulting, tell me how it started and your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So I came to this work professionally through a circuitous route. I went from Wall Street to stand-up comedy to now DEI consulting. And for me, I remember going to Wall Street, and I'm an immigrant from Iran. I grew up in the times of the hostage crisis, and then 9/11 happened. So I grew up with a lot of discrimination against people from my part of the world. And that was tough. And on Wall Street, I was often the only woman in the room, never mind the only woman of color. And looking around me, there just seemed to be no path to success despite good work. And I only stayed on Wall Street for 3 years because I just was nothing I did was making a difference. It was all white men getting ahead. And I like to say that was back in the 1900s, but it was the 1990s. And I thought we were past that, but we weren't. And I always remembered it. And I bring that to my work now as a DEI consultant and trainer. I never want anyone else to miss out on the career that they want because of their identity. That is not something that should hold you back. And so that is really what drives my work, that and really wanting to build an equitable world. I was very much like a make the world a better place type. I studied international relations. So yeah, I work with organizations to make their companies more diverse, inclusive, and equitable.
What do the three of you see happening in your industries? Do you see any change? I'm going to be very specific, say in the last year because of what happened this summer. Do you see any change, Tissa?
I absolutely do. After the murder of George
Floyd, whoops, you froze.
I mean, we all witnessed. It was awful. I mean, there's just not anything I could say to do justice to what happened. We have seen a shift in how companies have their DEI conversations. We've seen a shift from maybe sort of a surface level diversity conversation to deeper conversations about anti-racism. I've seen things talked about at work that I thought we were far away from, but here we are. And white privilege, white supremacy. We even heard it in President Biden's inaugural address yesterday. He mentioned the words white supremacy, systemic racism. Mm-hmm. We're having these conversations now much more openly than before, and this is good. And in terms of industry, I am seeing smaller businesses do this work, businesses that thought, well, we're a family business or there's just a handful of us here. But we're actually looking around and we're kind of all the same. We're all white, and we want to have discussion around this too. So the trend I'm seeing is also towards smaller businesses as well as the topics and the depth of the conversation.
Liz, do you see a change in your industry?
Well, I just want to start by saying there's a article in BizNow. BizNow is one of the largest producers of commercial real estate events and news. So it's a newspaper that folks read, continuously. Mm-hmm. And they had a series of articles in November 2020, so a couple of months ago. One of the major headlines was 90% of major brokerage leadership is white men, and that's a definite problem. Another topic was 85% of leaders are white at the finance giants that bankroll commercial real estate. So there's a recognition. There's no question there's a recognition that things need to change. We need to diversify the leadership. And I think you have to really be intentional about building a diverse pipeline to bring people up, to recognize the talent, and talent comes in all colors and shapes and sizes, right? So I think we're on the path, on the correct path to promote women, people of color into these leadership roles. And I think you'll find that, you know, these companies, at least some of them that were mentioned in these articles, are making a concerted effort to make those changes.
Thank you, Liz. Reggie, what do you see in your business?
Well, within my company specifically, I'm one of few people of color in the company, the discussion has come up more. I still want to go deeper, but we've had some discussions there, and that's been a breakthrough for us to do that. And also because I work with customers, commercial and residential, that I've had interesting conversations with customers or potential customers. I remember one day in particular, me and a Brazilian woman were speaking, and I think we talked for about half an hour, nothing to do with business, just about the current climate and her migration to the US and some things that she's experienced and trying to understand why is all this happening. And it was a very interesting conversation, which if things didn't happen, unfortunately, as they did this summer, maybe that wouldn't have come up. So it's definitely, at least during the summer, it's top of mind for a lot of people. I hope that doesn't go away and that we continue to discuss it.
So I think what I'm hearing from all three of you is that people are more relaxed about the topic and discussing the topic, because I know that I am very conscious. Oh my gosh, am I going to say the wrong thing? Am I going to offend somebody? Because of my own ignorance. But I'm hearing from you that people aren't worried about that so much anymore, but they want to talk about it. Would you agree with that?
I would, to some extent.
Yeah, yeah.
Go ahead.
I would agree with it. I don't know if the word is relaxed. I think they're more willing to talk about it. And I think if you create a safe environment, you know, a forum that, you know, you're not going to be judged, and we understand that people have these preconceptions of things, impartial, implicit bias that people have. So, you know, we recognize that, you know, we have it. And so we recognize that. And I think providing a forum, a comfortable, safe environment to have those discussions will elicit people to come forth.
Tissa, what do you think?
I completely agree. I agree that it's maybe more an openness and willingness than maybe relaxed, and also recognizing that we need to do it. I think those conversations were avoided for a long time. So it was like, oh, well, we don't need to do that, or we're just not comfortable, or we're going to avoid it. And I think it's reached a point where organizations are realizing we can't avoid this anymore. Right. This is a part of society, and looking around, we recognize it. So it's really brought it to the forefront. Mm-hmm. And when we look at it in terms of US demographics and how those are changing, Generation Z is the most diverse demographic we've ever had in this country. Every generation is becoming more diverse. So whatever business you're in, your customer base is changing, it's becoming more diverse. If your internal staff does not reflect the demographics of the country, your business will fall behind. So there's the sort of business-minded thought and motive behind it also, but at a societal level, we can't ignore this anymore. We can't hide from it anymore.
You know, Tissa, I'm glad you said that, because the courts are beginning to reflect some of the diversity, not enough at all, in our society. And they're also, the judges are undergoing strict implicit bias, explicit bias. Some of them get it, some of them don't. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, but I'm a domestic violence attorney and I represent anybody and everybody, including batterers. I defend batterers, because I don't think we have enough resources for batterers. But quite frankly, when I can sense now, I'm not sure I understand it as an attorney, but I can sense the bias of a judge, and maybe you can help me. I don't know how to address it. Am I going to say, hey, listen, judge, I think you're really biased. Why don't you relook at this? I can't do that. I can't criticize a judge up front. So if anybody has any ideas, Liz, you're an attorney. If you have any ideas, I'd love to hear it.
You know, the courts are run by the administrative office of the trial court, right? So there are people there that have training in this and that conduct these trainings. And, you know, if you've got a particular issue with a judge, I would just make the phone call and just not, you know, dime out the judge, but have a discussion with this person and maybe ask those questions of this person who is training these judges, right?
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
And can I do that anonymously? That's a
I
joke.
don't, okay.
Because you know why? I really don't want, because it'll come back on my client, to be quite frank.
Yeah.
You know, and I can't risk that as a defense attorney. I'm the voice. I'm the face.
Well,
And-
shame on the organization if that happens, Susan, frankly.
But you know it does.
Well,
Well, I'll say it. It does happen. I think that you have to be circuitous in how you criticize those in any organization.
I'm not saying criticize. I'm just saying make the call with the question, you know, not naming any names, but I've had this experience, and see where the conversation goes. I think it's an important phone call to make, frankly.
I think you're right, and I think I'm going to try it. I'll let you know how it goes, but I think that's really, really good advice. Liz, how can community groups start to have these conversations, like Rotary clubs, business networking groups?
Yeah, you and I were just talking about that a little bit off camera. So the Rotary has taken quite the initiative in terms of talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. They have folks that are stepping up to the plate, that are taking their presentation to all the Rotary clubs. And I think if we can get this kind of training to these types of groups, Rotaries is so embedded into the community, right? So they're going to spread the word. And for the most part, Rotarians are good, decent people that want service above self, right? So I think it's a great organization to start to train and to spread the word, if you will, and have these conversations in those safe environments.
And Tissa, you address Rotary clubs, don't you? You'll come and speak to Rotary clubs.
Yes, I do, and I have, and I agree with Liz's points that is a good environment also to have it, because people know each other, they're invested in the community, they care, and so that's a different way also to, or in some ways, it facilitates that conversation in a different way. Going into a workplace, people are sometimes in the room with their boss, they don't want to say the wrong thing in front of their colleagues. In a community group, people are a little more relaxed, using an earlier word, to have these conversations. So I think for community groups, business networking groups, book clubs even, to focus their books on anti-racism, those sort of community efforts can really do something. You get an introduction to those concepts, you start to have those conversations that are difficult, and it is a starting point or a continuation point, depending on the group.
Reggie, some organizations say things like, we don't want to talk about politics, or we don't want to talk about race. What are your thoughts on that?
I understand it, because I know, we all know it's it can be an inflammatory topic, but I also see the need to do it, because it's particularly in 2020, I'm sure there's been a lot of tension, maybe not as much because we're all Zooming, but if there were more water cooler talk, if there were more of us meeting in the office in person than there actually was, there'd been a lot more attention in the office. So I think it needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed properly. And you can address race and diversity and equity and inclusion without it being political. Now, I'm sure someone may bring the political party. I know that's surprising, Susan, but
I don't see how.
Well, if you stick to those topics, if you just make it about that and not about what party do you belong to, then that's a better conversation. Now, I'm not saying that in the course of that, of course, someone's going to assume it's political or maybe want to bring politics into it. But if you just stick to the script, if you stick to the topic at hand, that's really what you want to address. No one's trying to persuade anyone to any particular party, and no one can actually make anyone be inclusive or be or embrace diversity. But you do want to, because even from your boss, I can't make you think that that's the right thing to do. But I can have the conversation with you and make you aware and at least hope that it'll be something that is part of your thought process. And if you do have influence like hiring and firing, you do want to make sure that that's ingrained into the culture of the organization.
Can I just add what Reggie
Sure, absolutely.
I absolutely agree with Reggie that the politics has to stay out of it, because people just get turned off with the politics. But I was having a discussion with somebody that is training in DEI yesterday, and they were talking about the Black Lives Matter movement. Okay, to me, that's not a political movement, but for some people, it is perceived as a political movement. And that's unfortunate because, you know, I don't think they get it if they're perceiving it as a political movement. So in the training, this person said that he has to tiptoe around that because there are people in the audience that think it's a political movement. So I think we have to be mindful. And I think Reggie is right on with his description of how it should be introduced.
But Liz, do you think if there are caveats before you speak of, if I mention certain organizations, it's not political, it's for the organization and the purpose and the mission of the organization itself? Is there a way to frame, because not to mention Black Lives Matter, to me, is a huge omission. You have to see it, you have to name it. You have to frame it, you have to name it, and you have to change it.
I think you're right. That's one way to approach it. But unfortunately, there are people that hear that Black Lives Matter. They have a visceral response to that. And, you know, my life matters. You've heard that, right? Mm-hmm. So it becomes politicized in that person's mind. And we have to work around that in some way.
I think we have to find new ways to do that. And to be mindful that maybe this is not the group where you mention it because you're going to lose your audience. You're not going to hear the real message of the presentation. I don't know. I think these are very complicated questions, issues, and I think that's what makes this work so hard. Wouldn't you say, Tissa?
I agree. And on those points, the idea that we even align Black Lives Matter with a political side is a problem. Mm-hmm. That's an issue of human rights. And if you're saying my politics does not include human rights, rethink your politics. Now, I agree bringing politics into a conversation can be very difficult, particularly in the workplace. I don't get into politics, but Black Lives Matter to me is not political. It's an issue of human rights, of equity, of justice. And even the terminology around diversity, equity, and inclusion work has been changing with time. At first it was D and I, then it was DEI, then I heard people doing I and D. They, you know, different things were prioritized depending on which letter you put first. I've heard belonging come into the conversation. I've heard the word justice, where now I see the acronym JEDI. It's sort of like, a cutesy, I don't know. I think it's kind of, well, I shouldn't call it cutesy. Some people get into it. That I'm the Jedi manager at whatever organization. So that word justice is coming into the conversation more, and I think that's good. So I think to politicize some of these topics, it's to me, justice is not political. Equity is not political. Those are about basic human rights.
Wow. Reggie, are diversity conversations only for people of color?
Of course not. I know people may think that, but it should be for everyone. That's what's going to help the conversation. That's what's going to help society to get better if we're all having the conversation and if we're all discussing it and discussing the good and bad points, if you will, of it, so that everyone's engaged in what it really means, and that, as we just said, it's not politicized, but it's something about it's about basic human rights, dignity, respect that we want to show our fellow human being. So I think in some circles diversity is posed as a bad thing and shouldn't be looked at. And there's so many ways where you, even in the business side, you can show how it improves your business, improves your bottom line to have a diverse workforce and to address a diverse audience, because the world is getting more diverse. Definitely America is. So that so it needs to happen amongst everybody to the extent that it can.
Oh my goodness, this has been so enlightening, inspiring, provocative, and complicated. You're doing very complicated work, and I admire the three of you for doing it. As a lawyer, I'm bound by the law, and I'm grateful for that, because there's a structure around me and my client and the issues. But when you three go out, you're going out into the wilderness, and there's nothing protecting you except the three of you and your experiences and your knowledge. Thank you so much. Reggie Smalls, do you have any final words for today? Because I intend to have the three of you back again, but would you like to say anything today?
Well, I thank you for the opportunity. It's been great working with Liz and Tissa, and Tissa is fabulous. If anyone needs to have her come in and speak to their company or their organization, and it's been a joy to work with them a little bit on a couple of occasions. And I just thank you for the opportunity for us to be able to share.
Oh, my pleasure. Liz, do you have any final words?
Well, I want to echo Reggie's sentiments. It's been great working with these two, and also thank you for having us. And I got to say, I am hopeful with this new administration, as you mentioned, that he talked about it in his inaugural speech. So I am hopeful, and I look forward to what we can do in our discussions about DEI.
Tissa, final word?
Yeah, I will echo my colleagues here, Liz and Reggie. They brought me into the networking group process. It was their idea to have these anti-racism conversations. So I thank you for bringing me into it. Thank you, Susan, for highlighting this on your program. I also am encouraged by the depth and level of the conversation that I see now, that we're not just tiptoeing around DEI, but we're having those more in-depth and more difficult conversations. And I hope that will continue and not just be a trend.
Well, thank you for being on the safety net. I would urge you to put your contact information, if you wish to, in the chat, and maybe Corbin can run it when this is taped. And I hope to see you all again. That's it for the safety net. Thank you, Corbin. Bye.